Imagine this. Lucy, a girl who loved English, but could never speak it without feeling nervous. She wanted to speak English naturally, like a pro. But how? One day, she met someone who changed everything. Hey there! Welcome to English Tone, your favorite place to learn English in a fun and easy way. Here, we teach you to speak English naturally through stories and helpful tips. In today's story, we'll learn how Lucy discovered the secret to speaking English naturally. Ready? Let's dive in. Lucy always loved English. It was the subject she looked forward to most at school. When she read books in English, it was like opening the door to a new world. She could understand every word, every sentence. The flow of the language seemed so beautiful, like a melody in her mind. She had a particular fondness for mystery novels, where the characters would converse in such eloquent and sophisticated ways. The twists, the suspense, the stories that came alive through the words, they all fascinated her. In fact, Lucy was quite good at English, especially when it came to reading and writing. If you gave her an English novel, she could read it without hesitation. She could write essays with ease, connecting her ideas smoothly. She even received compliments from her teachers about her well-written compositions. But there was one area where Lucy felt like she was falling short: speaking. It wasn't that Lucy didn't want to speak English. In fact, she had a deep desire to communicate just as easily as the people in the movies she loved to watch. The problem was, whenever she tried to speak, something would hold her back. The words just didn't come out the way she imagined. It was like she had a perfect image of the sentence in her head, but when she opened her mouth, it was like the words got stuck. She would freeze, unsure of how to start, and then the nerves would flood her thoughts. The fear of making a mistake would take over. And that was when her confidence slipped away. She could still remember the first time she tried speaking English in front of others. It was during a group project in class, and she had been assigned to discuss a book she had read in English. She had prepared for the presentation for weeks, reading and rereading the chapters, writing notes on key points, practicing her ideas. But the moment she stood in front of her classmates ready to speak, her heart raced. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her. When she tried to start, her mouth went dry, and the words seemed to disappear. She stammered, tried again, but it didn't work. Her classmates looked at her with friendly eyes, but Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that they were judging her. She tried to speak slowly, but even that didn't seem to help. She felt like every mistake she made was a mark against her. She knew she had understood the book well, but the fear of speaking the wrong word or using incorrect grammar made her anxious. The more she thought about it, the worse it got. She stuttered. The character in the story is... It felt like she was trapped in her own head. The words simply wouldn't flow. After that day, Lucy felt embarrassed. Every time the teacher called on her to speak, her stomach would churn with dread. She started avoiding any situation where she might be asked to speak in English. She only participated when she was sure she could write or read her answer aloud. Speaking in English just felt impossible. It wasn't just the fear of making mistakes that held her back. It was the feeling that she couldn't express herself the way she wanted. She saw how effortlessly her classmates spoke in English, with their sentences flowing smoothly, their accents crisp and clear. Their voices sounded confident and natural, and Lucy wished she could speak like them. Why was it so difficult for her? She even started to question herself. Maybe I'm just not good at speaking, she thought. Maybe I'll never be able to speak like others. And then she remembered the movies, the English speakers who seemed to talk effortlessly, as though they didn't even have to think about what they were saying. They didn't hesitate. They didn't stutter. Their English flowed smoothly, like a river that knew exactly where it was going. Lucy envied that flow. It seemed so natural to them, so easy. But for her, every word felt like a mountain to climb. The more she tried to push herself to speak, the more difficult it became. Her friends often told her, "You know, Lucy, you're really good at English. You can read, write, and understand everything perfectly." They would encourage her to speak more. But the idea of speaking in front of others still terrified her. She didn't want to make mistakes, and she certainly didn't want to look foolish. She often thought about how much better her friends were at speaking. It wasn't just their fluency that bothered her. It was their confidence. They didn't second-guess themselves. They didn't overthink every sentence. They just spoke. Lucy was left wondering, why can't I do that? What's wrong with me? It felt like there was a gap between the way she thought about English and the way she could speak it. It was almost as if there were two different versions of herself. One who was the perfect English reader and writer, and another who struggled to string together a sentence in front of others. This gap made her even more anxious. She began to feel that speaking English was not something she would ever be able to do easily. But Lucy didn't want to give up. She wanted to break free from her fear and speak English just like the people she admired. She knew that if she could only overcome this hurdle, she would feel more confident and comfortable with English. She didn't know exactly how, but she was determined to find a way. And so, as the days went by, Lucy started thinking about how she could change her situation. She knew she had to start somewhere, but where? There had to be a solution. The fear, the nervousness, it couldn't last forever. She was tired of being stuck. One day, as Lucy sat at the park, watching people talk in English effortlessly, she heard a voice beside her. "You seem deep in thought. Everything okay?" It was Elizabeth, one of her classmates, who had always been so confident when speaking English. Lucy smiled weakly and said, "I'm just wondering, why can't I speak English as easily as everyone else? I know I understand it, but when I try to speak, I freeze." Elizabeth looked at Lucy for a moment and then said, "Well, maybe I can help you with that." It was a bright, sunny afternoon when Lucy decided to take a walk in the park. She loved spending her free time there, surrounded by the green trees, chirping birds, and the sound of children playing. But today, something was different. As Lucy strolled along the path, she noticed a group of students gathered under a big oak tree. They were laughing and chatting, and there was one girl in particular who caught Lucy's attention. This girl, Elizabeth, seemed to be speaking English so effortlessly. Her words flowed like a smooth river, and the way she expressed herself was so natural. Lucy had been learning English for a while, but she couldn't speak like that. Her English sounded stiff and hesitant, and she often worried about making mistakes. It wasn't like Elizabeth, who was confident and relaxed. Lucy watched them for a while from a distance, feeling a mix of admiration and envy. Elizabeth wasn't just speaking English, she was living in the language. Her friends were nodding, smiling, and laughing, hanging on to every word she said. Lucy couldn't help but wonder, how does she do it? What was Elizabeth's secret? Lucy was tired of struggling with her English. She wanted to speak it effortlessly, too, without feeling nervous or embarrassed. She decided to find out. Taking a deep breath, Lucy gathered her courage and walked up to the group. Elizabeth was the first to notice her. "Hey, you look familiar. Are you new around here?" Elizabeth smiled warmly. Lucy was a little shy, but tried to keep calm. Yes, I'm Lucy. I've seen you around and, well, I've noticed that you speak English so easily. How do you do it?" Elizabeth blinked in surprise, but then gave a knowing smile. "Oh, that? It's not as hard as you think. I just practice a lot. But I can tell you're trying to learn too, right? Why don't you join us for a while? I'm sure you'll be speaking naturally in no time." Lucy hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to speak with others in English. But then Elizabeth's words felt like an invitation. She couldn't turn down. Maybe this is the sign I've been waiting for, she thought. Elizabeth introduced Lucy to her friends, and as they all chatted, Lucy couldn't help but admire how easy it was for Elizabeth to keep the conversation going. Elizabeth spoke English, as if it were her native language, full of expressions, idioms, and even jokes. There were no hesitations, no awkward pauses, just a natural flow of words that made it seem like speaking English was the most comfortable thing in the world. As the conversation continued, Lucy started to feel more at ease. Elizabeth was kind and patient, making sure everyone was included. She asked Lucy questions about her interests, her favorite movies, and even shared a few funny stories in English. Lucy slowly began to open up, answering in short sentences and laughing at Elizabeth's jokes. It felt better than Lucy had expected, though she still couldn't speak as smoothly as Elizabeth. When the conversation came to a natural pause, Lucy turned to Elizabeth with curiosity in her eyes. "I can see that you're really comfortable speaking English, but how did you get to this point?" "I mean, I've been practicing for a while, but it's still not easy for me." Elizabeth smiled again, but this time her smile held a bit of mystery. "It's not about how long you've been practicing or even how much you study. It's about how you feel when you speak. You have to speak without worrying too much about being perfect. Trust me, no one speaks perfectly all the time, but the more you speak, the easier it gets. You just have to let go of your fears and be okay with making mistakes. That's how you get better." Lucy listened carefully, hanging on to every word. This was the advice she had been waiting for. She had always been scared to speak because she didn't want to make mistakes, but Elizabeth was telling her that mistakes were actually part of the process. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how true that was. If she kept waiting for the perfect moment, she would never get better. "I guess I've been focusing too much on getting it right," Lucy admitted. "I've been so worried about saying things perfectly that I forget to just enjoy the conversation." Elizabeth nodded. "Exactly, and that's why speaking English feels so natural for me. I don't worry about mistakes, I just talk. And that's what you need to do too. Start talking more, and eventually English will feel like second nature to you." Lucy was excited but also a little nervous. Could she really do that? Could she really let go of her fear of making mistakes and speak English just like Elizabeth? As she pondered this question, Elizabeth gave her one final piece of advice. "Why don't you try talking to me more often? I'd be happy to help you practice and we can make it fun." Lucy's heart raced. This was exactly what she needed, a chance to practice without worrying about mistakes. But before she could respond, Elizabeth quickly added, "So, what do you say? Are you ready for step 2 in learning how to speak English naturally?" And just like that, Lucy realized that she was about to embark on a new chapter of her language learning journey. Elizabeth smiled warmly at Lucy's confused expression and took a deep breath. "You know, Lucy," she began, "it's not magic. There's no special trick to speaking English naturally. It's all about practice and building confidence. The more you speak, the more you'll get the hang of it." Lucy listened intently, hoping for some secret formula to instantly transform her into a fluent English speaker. But Elizabeth's words were simpler than she expected. "You need to speak English as much as possible. Don't worry about making mistakes. Everyone makes them, even native speakers. What's important is that you're trying to communicate and not worrying about being perfect." Lucy looked puzzled. "But I've always tried to speak perfectly. I thought I needed to use perfect grammar and sound just like the people on TV shows. I was afraid people might judge me if I made a mistake." Elizabeth chuckled softly, shaking her head. "That's a common belief, Lucy. But it's not true. Perfection can be an enemy when you're learning a language. If you focus too much on grammar rules or sounding perfect, you'll freeze up. You'll be too worried about making mistakes and lose the flow of conversation." Lucy nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "So, you mean I should just keep speaking, even if it's not perfect?" "Exactly," Elizabeth replied with a bright smile. When you focus on speaking freely, you'll start improving. Just talk, even if it's simple. The more you speak, the more natural it will feel. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning process. They help you improve. Lucy thought about this advice for a moment. It felt strange, but somehow comforting. She had always feared making mistakes, thinking they would slow her down. But now, Elizabeth's words made it clear. Mistakes were simply stepping stones to improvement. But how do I start? It feels so hard to speak without worrying about every word, Lucy admitted. Elizabeth's eyes twinkled as she answered. Start small. You don't have to speak like a professor or a TV host right away. Talk to yourself, talk to your family, or find a language buddy. Just speak, and don't worry about getting everything perfect. Over time, you'll start speaking more fluently, and you'll be surprised at how much easier it becomes. Lucy felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had been so focused on sounding flawless that she hadn't realized the importance of simply practicing. I'll try that, she said, feeling more determined. Elizabeth leaned in and added, Remember, confidence is key. The more confident you feel, the more you'll want to speak. And speaking is the best way to build that confidence. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just embrace them as part of the journey. Lucy's heart lifted. She was starting to feel excited about the idea of speaking English without worrying about making every sentence perfect. Elizabeth's advice felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She could finally focus on what mattered, connecting with others, sharing her thoughts, and enjoying the language. But where do I start? Lucy asked, eager to begin her new journey. Elizabeth smiled, her eyes full of understanding. The first step is to speak regularly, and I know just the way for you to start. Why not talk to your family? Ask them simple questions in English, even if you're nervous. It's all about practice. Lucy's excitement grew. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to start practicing and speaking English naturally. Elizabeth's words had given her the confidence she needed to take that first step. Inspired by Elizabeth's advice, Lucy started speaking English every day. She practiced with her family, her friends, and even by herself in front of the mirror. At first it felt awkward, but soon she began to feel more comfortable. The words started coming out more naturally, and she didn't mind making mistakes anymore. She was learning to speak English like she spoke her first language, without stress, just conversation. A few weeks later, Lucy had become a more confident English speaker. She no longer feared speaking in front of others. One day, she found herself chatting with Elizabeth again. Wow, Lucy, you sound amazing now. You speak English so naturally, Elizabeth said with a smile. Lucy beamed. She knew that speaking English naturally wasn't about being perfect. It was about practicing, being confident, and just enjoying the conversation. And that's how Lucy learned to speak English naturally. You can do it too. Just keep practicing. Speak with confidence and don't worry about being perfect. If you enjoyed Lucy's story and want to learn more tips, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Subscribe to English Tone for more fun and easy lessons. Keep practicing, and soon you'll be speaking English like a pro too.